Just because he's got some plot armor doesn't mean he's undefeatable. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we're here to talk about the times when Wolverine hasn't exactly been the best there is at what he does. It's time to count down the top 10 most powerful villains who defeated Wolverine and learn just exactly how it all went down. Let's get into it. Number 10. Omega Red. While Omega Red has also lost to Wolverine in the past, he's also had his fair share of victories against him. Omega Red initially proved almost too powerful to Wolverine, especially when it came to the use of death spores which weakened him. There was a time when Omega Red successfully captured the hero, and he only succeeded in surviving by getting help to escape, unfit to take on Omega Red alone. More recently in the comics, Omega Red surfaced wanting to join Krakoa, but he was actually revealed to be in league with Dracula, and in fact helped Dracula to get his hands on Wolverine's blood, enabling the villain to walk in the sun. Since then, Omega Red has chosen to portray Dracula being truthful with the mutants and becoming their true ally, but Logan of course still finds it hard to trust him. He doesn't really believe he's the true ally. Perhaps because Wolverine himself remembers all the times that Omega Red has stabbed him in the front and the back and just basically stabbed him all around with his carbonadium tentacles. Number 9. Mysterio. Mysterio in an alternate reality completely defeats Wolverine, and in the most horrible way. In the Old Man Logan continuity, Mysterio manipulated Wolverine, getting him to fight against and kill all the X-Men, explaining how this could have happened given all their amazing abilities by claiming that his friends would likely hesitate to take him out. Wolverine at the time thought he was taking on a bunch of supervillains who had invaded the mansion, and Mysterio also claims that Wolverine's ego is kinda to blame for him accepting the illusion. After all, Wolverine believing that he could have possibly taken on all of these supervillains himself all at once does seem pretty arrogant. I gotta say, I kind of agree with Mysterio here. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we get to tell you stories about people kicking other people's butts, I love telling these stories, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Sabertooth. Sabertooth has beaten Logan so many times that I've personally lost count. Sometimes it seems as though Victor's sole purpose has been to make Wolverine suffer. Case in point, how it became a tradition for Sabertooth to go and mess up Wolverine once a year on his birthday. Sabertooth has also been the mastermind behind a great deal of psychological plots to mess with Logan, including at one point pitting his son Daken against him, forcing Wolverine to kill his own son. Wolverine thought this was how it had to be at the time, but he would actually later learn that it all happened due to the machinations of Sabertooth. People don't often think about how smart Sabertooth is, but he's pretty crafty. Number 7. Mystique. Mystique is one of those villains you don't want to underestimate because, well, it's really dangerous to do so. Case in point, why do I say case in point so much? Who's been saying that to me that I've been putting this in my script? An example being when Wolverine thought he had killed her and would never see her again, only for her to return having been resurrected by the Hand to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her. She not only defeated him in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense, using him to get information and also to mess with his head when she posed as Yukio. She really messed with him. But that's Mystique for you. Number 6. Spore. While Spore was an insanely powerful villain who did end up defeated in the end, it wasn't actually Wolverine that did the defeating in this scenario. Though he did fight against Spore. Spore appears in one of the earlier stories in Wolverine Volume 2 and was created by Archie Goodwin and John Byrne. It was an ancient entity who first appeared in issue 21, where we learned that the drug that was being used to increase the strength of Roundhouse at the cost of his sanity was actually a part of that villain, and that using that drug was kind of how it infected its victims and was able to move more into the physical world through them. Spore, it turned out, was an ancient bioweapon created by the Deviants long ago that had laid dormant on planet Earth after requiring the strength of a Celestial in order to be defeated the first time around. Although Wolverine struggled to defeat this enemy, the possibly mutant healer Sister Salvation managed to use her powers to defeat it, cleansing Spore permanently, but at great cost, with her hands and possibly ability to heal becoming dramatically damaged afterwards. But Wolverine couldn't have done that alone. He needed the Sister Salvation backup for that one. Number 5. Madelyne Pryor. Another enemy who Wolverine likely wouldn't stand a chance against is Madelyne Pryor. In the What If Inferno issue, we get to see what would happen if Madelyne Pryor had won the day and she and Sim basically turned Wolverine into their little pet, unleashing his feral side and making him a complete monster. And I really do mean a complete monster. The hero doesn't even stand a chance against their influence as they help him to give in to the darker side of himself that he's always been working so hard to repress. It's even worse than losing a battle or over his life, because in this story, Wolverine loses his morality and basically his humanity. I think that's worse. Is that worse than death? I think it's worse than death. If you lose entirely who you are. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is a long-standing villain for the X-Men and Wolverine. As we discussed earlier with Omega Red, the villain recently managed to best Wolverine by concocting a plan to capture him and use his blood to power up himself and his other loyal vampires, forcing Omega to become his undercover agent on Krakoa. Of course, in the end, Omega Red would turn against him, allowing Wolverine and the other mutants to strike back, but during that first story of the new series back in issue 1, Wolverine saw himself pretty heartily defeated at the hands of Dracula, and what made it worse is that he didn't really even understand at the time that he had been playing right into Dracula's hands. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto is of course another major supervillain who bested Wolverine. He was the one responsible for transforming him into a feral version of himself, stripping Wolverine of the adamantium that coated his skeleton. This was a huge part of us learning more about Wolverine's abilities and his power set. This was when it was revealed that his claws were actually bone claws and they were themselves coated. We also learned here that he had the capacity to be intensely feral. I mean, we'd always known that Wolverine had a wild side, a feral side. It had been alluded to in the comics, but we didn't know just how wild Logan could be. Don't worry though, although Wolverine lost all of his adamantium in the fight against Magneto and his nose, Professor X made sure that Magneto paid for what he'd done, and that he could never hurt anyone again by completely cutting off his mind, in essence kinda leaving Magneto still physically alive but brain dead. It should also be noted that Magneto has killed Wolverine many times across multiple different realities and timelines. Number 2. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain that Wolverine has faced across many different realities, whether with a team or on his own. In some realities, Wolverine has managed to eventually win the war against Apocalypse, but has also lost battles here and there along the way. In the X-Men animated series from the 90s, we see no exception, as Wolverine attempts to take on Apocalypse alongside the X-Men. When it's his turn to strike, he completely misses Apocalypse with his claws, who manages to escape along with most of his horsemen. Kind of embarrassing. Number 1. Dark Phoenix. While Jean Grey would likely never want to hurt Wolverine, and he has honestly almost killed her on a few occasions across the multiverse, always to her benefit of course, usually, to avoid her having to suffer. When Dark Phoenix emerges, it's quickly made apparent just how much stronger this persona and force is in comparison to Wolverine. When the darker side of Phoenix Force makes itself known at one point during Phoenix Endsong, Wolverine doesn't stand a chance against it. In fact, he only survives his fight with the Dark Phoenix because he fits into her plan, with her aiming to use him as bait. It does seem as though he succeeds in weakening the Dark Phoenix, but once again, this seems to all be part of the Phoenix Force's plan, allowing her to take a more active role as she works towards getting what she wants, which she thinks at the time is Cyclops and his unlimited energy source, his optic blasts, but in reality what Phoenix really wants is to feel whole again and feel loved. What a lovely little moral at the end of that story. What do you think are some of the most powerful villains that Wolverine has ever lost to? Who are some villains he hasn't fought that you'd love to see Logan take on? And who do you think are the most underrated Wolverine villains that should make a return? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Most Powerful Alternate Versions of Wonder Woman. NTG Nick Greer comments, there's also Becca from Justice League Gods and Monsters. Can't wait to see her in part 2. Maybe. I would love to put Becca on a part 2. I hope we get to do a part 2 to that list, because there's lots of cool people I didn't talk about, and we should probably highlight them. Hannah Huddleston responds, I love Wonder Woman. She's amazing and strong, she's wonderful. I also love Wonder Woman. She is pretty great. I don't know if she's definitely not my favorite DC character, but I cannot deny that I just love Diana. She's a cool broad, you know what I mean? Is that a thing people say anymore? No. She's a cool broad. Apparently I'm traveling back in time to the 1920s. I'm walking here. B. Bailey writes, glad to see Diana getting some love. I know, but I feel like she also deserves the love because, you know, that 80th anniversary is coming up. I am hyped. I am ready. Give me all of the Wonder Woman books. I need to read all of them. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your thoughts and feels shouted out in a future video. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you as always to stay nerdy, YouTube.